The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him, but the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, but his own people did not accept him. But to those who did accept him, he gave power to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not by natural generation, nor by human choice, nor by man's decision, but of God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we saw his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'The one who is coming after me ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace. Because while the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only Son, God, who is at his Father's side, has revealed him." The Gospel of the Lord.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. What is Christmas about? Christmas, of course, is about Christ. Keep Christ in Christmas. And Christ is the light which saves us from the darkness of sin and gives us all hope. John says that Christ is the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The darkness has not overcome the light. And so nothing can overcome Christ. No evil, no sin, no negative experience we've had. There's always hope. There's always light. The darkness will never overcome Christ, our light. And so this Word, in the beginning, who was with God and who was God and is God, this Word who becomes flesh, is this light of God's love. Through this Word came life and light and the love of God. And so Jesus makes God's love visible. We heard in the second reading that Jesus is the imprint, the stamp of the Father's being. So we can't see the Father. The Father is invisible. But Jesus is like the Father's face being imprinted on a baby's face. That's Christmas. The Magi come, the shepherds come, they weren't told to kneel, but seeing this face full of love and wonder, they fall to their knees. And Joseph and Mary, they look at their little son, Mary's little son, and they fall as well in love and wonder. Because from this beaming baby's face is this light of the Father, his love. God is love. God is love, John says. And he who abides in God abides in love. And Jesus is, in a way, the first, you could say, who has abided in the love of the Father from eternity. And then when he takes on flesh in his mother's womb, one of us, in other words, Jesus in his human nature, is a firstborn among us, the first to abide in that Father's love perfectly. He's the imprint, the stamp of the Father's gaze upon his creation, upon men and women, upon all those who are made in his image. And so God really has become one of us. Love has become one of us. Love has taken on a face. And whenever we love, when we do something for the good of the other person, when we put ourselves second in a way to the good of another, and then that same light, in a way, beaming from the baby, beams from our own heart, beams from our own eyes. When, like a young father of a newborn gets up in the middle of the night to bring water or tea or cookies to his wife, that's the love of the Father. When the mother prepares sandwiches or lunches or goes shopping for what her children like, that's the love of the Father. Men and women are made in his image, male and female, the love of the Father. And we see that again, finally imprinted in the face of Jesus. And so God made his dwelling among us. He really became one of us, and he understands every feeling we have, every experience, like us in all ways except sin. And so he was adored as a child. He was raised in the Holy Family in Nazareth. As a man, he taught and he preached. He healed. He raised the dead. He forgave sins. He lifted the burdens of souls. And then, as his reward, he was crucified. He was stripped and died humiliated, but then rose on the third day after his death and ascended into heaven with his body, with the imprint of the Father. He returned to the Father, although he was never separated from him on earth, but he brought into heaven his body and our own human nature. And so after all of this, where is the Lord? He came to earth the first time through the womb of Mary. Where is he now? Is he out there? And Christmas is just like remembering the dead, remembering someone's birthday who's no longer with us. We have a little memorial, then we have cake and punch. No, of course not. God is still with us. He's alive. This is not just a memorial. He's real. And he's still with us. And he's still close to us. His love is still physical among us. And most of all, we can never repeat enough that this love of the Father, this love of God who becomes flesh in Jesus, is the same Jesus in what looks like bread. The same Jesus who is in the Blessed Sacrament. Christmas is then about the Eucharist. Christmas is about the baby Jesus who is the same Jesus in the Eucharist, the same body, the same heart, the same love in the Eucharist. And then we can eat this body, as strange as it sounds. He says, "This is my body, which will be given up for you. Take and eat." It wasn't just for the 12 apostles around the table. He said to them, "Whoever hears you hears me." And so we too are meant to take and eat this love which makes us into love. When we prepare to receive the baby Jesus, not just in our hearts but in Holy Communion, when we prepare, then we can be changed into love. We can become more forgiving, more patient, more thinking of the other person, of other people, and most of all, we begin to love God more and more. And that's where our happiness begins. You know, when we see how new mothers and fathers, have their firstborn child, and they have such care and tenderness, like really even big men, who are like super macho hunters and such. The way that they carry a child in their palms or against their chest, it tells us what kind of effect that God's love can have on us. And the same care and tenderness that a father and mother have for their newborn baby is at least the same kind of care and tenderness that we should have for the Eucharist. At least. Sometimes mothers and fathers will say, "I never knew I could love until I had a child, until I had my son or had my daughter. I didn't know I was capable of a certain kind of love until I finally had a child." That is the least kind of love we should have for Jesus in the Eucharist, before we receive him especially. When we're in adoration, when we're in the Mass. Do we have that love? It doesn't always seem to come naturally, right? But that's where we can turn to the Virgin Mary. From her comes the gift of believing that her Son is in the Eucharist. Mary gives us the grace, or it comes through her, to believe that her Son is in what looks like a little host, that her Son is in what looks like bread in every little fragment that breaks off onto the priest's paten, that he cleans off carefully into the chalice so that nothing will be lost or disrespected. That comes from God through his mother, this faith. Because in the Eucharist, it's still Jesus. And in Jesus, he still has a heart that's innocent, like he was as a child and still is now. And so God does dwell among us. We should say Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. He is in heaven, but he's on earth also at the same time in the Eucharist, in every Catholic church, in every tabernacle. And so in the Eucharist, in the Blessed Sacrament, heaven and earth come together. Love is made flesh, hidden in what looks like food, to feed us with his love made flesh, so that we can become love, so that our flesh itself can become an instrument, a channel, a mediation of love. And so the more powerfully that we want to receive him, the more we might be inspired to try to make good confessions during this Christmas season, which continues all the way to the baptism of the Lord, that day when the Lord steps into our world and he steps even into our sin by being baptized. He doesn't become sinful at all, but he begins to step into our shoes. And in a similar way, we can, in a way, step into his holiness when we make a good confession and receive the grace of his mercy. And then in that way, we will also be more easily transformed when we receive Holy Communion. We'll be transformed by his love into his love.